Hey guys, that's Sleepy Girl here, and today we're going to be taking a look at pixel art. I've been requested to make a tutorial, so here we go. So here's a quick look at the projects that I've already made. You can also, a lot of people will call these mosaics. Now, I just refer to it as pixel art, that's how I know it. So I was requested to make a few things. And so this is why it's a little sporadic of content here, but we have some Disney stuff. Then we have this Starbucks logo as well as the mini drinks, and I was picturing the mini drinks being used, you know, to make like a menu board or something. And then lastly I went ahead and made this unicorn for Pulsley, because we all know he's obsessed with unicorns. So I want to start off by doing just a quick small pixel art in real time with you guys. So the first thing I would do when I go ahead to start this is I'm going to get my pixel board ready. So I have one blueprinted, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how I went ahead and created this. So the first thing you're going to have to do is go into the construction tab, and we're going to look up gutters. So this is basically just showing you what it's going to look like once you have your pixel board put together. So the back end of it ends up being a little thicker. Depending on your design, you can get away with not submerging it into something. However, in general, I think sometimes it can look best submerged in a wall piece or a path or anything like that. So the first thing you're going to do is rotate it so that you've got the small square end of the gutter funnel facing you, because that's what we're actually going to be using. So as you can see, it's a small square. And then essentially you just use the advanced move tool so that you can line them up. So what I like to do is get 2 or 4, think like a number that doubles easily together, and then I can go ahead and duplicate it a few times to get a square, and then duplicate that again. I'm not 100% sure how many I have in the grid that I've blueprinted. It kind of has grown with me. I just keep updating the blueprint as I make it bigger. However, that's around, the one that I have is around the size that you can actually get away with blueprinting, so it's under 4,000 pieces. Because eventually, depending on what you're doing, they're going to end up fairly large. And so once I lay down my blueprinted pixel board, if I'm working on something larger, I just go ahead and do that same thing that we did at the beginning. I just use the advanced move tool and duplicate so that I can make a larger one. So this is a fairly simple design. We're going to make a yin and yang. And so I like to grab as many pieces as I can that are going to be the same color, and then merge them and then color them. So this is not a piece that you can select multiple of and change the color like you can the alphabet, which is kind of a bummer, but then it also makes it easier so that if you wanted to do a color change or something, if you select something, then it's going to change a large portion, right? So it's going to make it much quicker to do a color change for your project. And so here I'm just working on the circle. In this one, because it's a simple design, you can see I end up selecting most of where it's going to be black, and once I just do 1 or 2 different selections before merging. However, you'll see we're going to do a time lapse of a larger project, and you'll see in that one that I make smaller sections and use the merge option much more frequently, just because in a larger design, I find when you're selecting it, I just get lost if I go too far, and so to prevent having to go back and erase things a million times or hit undo, I like to do smaller sections at a time. So this really is a fairly simple thing to do once you have the board done, and I'm going to have the board as well as any of the pixel art projects that you've seen in this video on my workshop, and that'll be linked down below. And so this is something that essentially you've probably done before. I know I've been doing pixel art since I was a kid and just not really known it or called it that. So one example would be on graph paper. I know in school I often use graph paper and I'd color in based on the squares. So that essentially is a form of pixel art. And then the main one is perler beads. So I don't know if you remember that, but you'd have a small pegboard and then you'd have these little round beads and you'd make a design and then you'd have to put wax paper on top of it and you'd iron it so that they would melt together. Essentially this is the very same thing, except instead of melting it at the end with an iron, you're going to go ahead and remove the excess gutter pieces so that you can have your finished piece. So this one doesn't take very long. Like I mentioned, this is a very simple design. It was just something small and quick that I could do in real time so that I could show you the process. So basically you get your board together, then you start selecting the pieces and then merge them together so that you can change them. You could also select one piece at a time and change the color, and that's how I did my first one, just because I wasn't thinking that you can just merge them. But once I figured out that you could merge them together and that would allow you to change the color, it just speeds up the process quite a bit. And again, like I mentioned, if you wanted to do a color change for something afterwards, it makes it that much easier because then you can change several of these gutter pieces at a time. And like I mentioned, with the larger pieces, like the unicorn has well over 1,500 gutter pieces. So to go ahead and change those one by one, if you did want to do a color change, it would just be, a very time consuming task. So I try and remove by hand, like one by one, the gutter pieces directly surrounding the design. And then I'll use the multiple select tool to get rid of the rest. I just find that with the multiple select tool, if you get too close, it's going to select your image as well, your design, and then it just becomes a bigger hassle than anything. So as I mentioned, depending on the design, you can get away with, not putting anything behind it. Like I don't find this looks too bad. Because it does end up with a black trim around it. However, from behind, because it is that gutter piece, it's going to look a little wonky. So there's like endless options on what you can use these for. You can use them as mosaic tiles. You can use them as almost like a poster type thing, on the wall as art. So a tip I have for when you're placing it in something is, if you'll notice, right before you get it to the right spot, the coloring becomes brighter. So that will basically tell you that it's as close to the piece of wall or path or whatever it may be that you're sinking this into, or even just the ground. That's basically when you know. And you'll see it again when I put the design into the wall. Right as it gets to the right spot, you'll see the white just really brightens up. And I've noticed this with every single one that I've done. Any of the lighter colors, they really just begin to pop. So it's not quite in the right spot here, I don't think. I think I go back. No. Okay. Well, you can see they're both, the white is very bright. But again, you'll see it on the final piece as well. And again, any of the ones you take from the workshop, it's the same thing. Right as they get to the right spot, I should say, the lighter colors just like completely brighten up. Now you can see here, I'm going to place a path. So again, just showing you that there's a million options. You can put them in the floor, you can put them on the wall, you can put them on a path. Another option as well is, instead of doing a design that has and like cutting out around the design, so this is a circle, we cut around the circle to make it circular. If you were doing like an animal or something, or a scenery, you could fill in a square or rectangle and then go ahead at the end and add a border of some kind, so either with wood or with some stone or whatever it is that would match the theming of your zoo. And then you could go ahead and use it as like a painting, and make it that kind of style. So there really is endless options with how you can decorate with these. So here I am. I've used my blueprinted pixel board. As I mentioned, when I use larger projects, I just use the advanced move tool. So I'm going to go ahead and put 4 of these out in a square. And once I get this laid out, we're going to switch over to a time lapse. And yeah, you're going to get to see a bigger project get completed, and how I go about that, and mainly just the sections. Like I really do smaller sections because I think it happens a few times here. When I don't do a smaller section first, I'll get really far and then I'll click somewhere that I wasn't supposed to click, or click off of the canvas, or hold shift and then everything duplicates, or just things are constantly happening. So I keep it to smaller sections, or at least I try to limit myself to smaller sections at a time, just so that I can have an easier time and do less mistakes and then less going back on my work. Now again, if you do select something that you weren't supposed to select and you've already merged them, you just double click on that piece and split it, or if it was a couple pieces, split them, and then just include them in the section that they're supposed to be in, or color them, like do a one-off and color it. It's very forgiving, and once you get the hang of it, it's, like I said, it's very simple. And when it comes to patterns and designs, you have unlimited creativity, so you really can do whatever the heck you want. If you're a creative person, there's tons of room to explore that creativity, and really make some beautiful things. As well as if you're somebody who's not overly creative, or you just can't think of something, or you're thinking of something very specific that you want and you don't know how to do it, there are tons and tons and tons of designs out there, and it's very easy to find these days. So when looking online for designs and templates, what I would suggest is there's kind of like 3 main categories. So you can now just look up pixel art, since it's become a more popular thing. Over the years, that's an art form that is becoming a thing. There's a lot of artists, especially people who do their art through the computer, that have experimented with pixel art and stuff. And I find if you're looking at pixel art, you're generally going to get very, very, very detailed with like billions of pixels, because it's things that people are doing over the computer. So that's your first option, and like I said, there's a million options. The second one would be to look up perler bead templates. Again, perler beads are things we played with as kids, and there's a perler bead design for absolutely everything. And then lastly, depending on your level of patience, and if you're really willing to sort through 1,000,001 results, you can also look up cross stitch patterns. They're a little more difficult to find. Generally that's something that people require payment for, but it is definitely an option. So here we go, we're almost done with this. As you can see, we've created a wolf. So this is a very artistic style wolf with, the fading of the colors on the inside and the twinkling star effect with the, leaving some of the pieces white. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this just so that I can show you again on the ground as well as upright on a wall. I really like how this wolf turned out. Again, just a simple design that I went and found on Pinterest. Pinterest is a great place for this type of thing. So you want to look at the yellow here. And as you can see, the yellow and the orange, all of a sudden it looked like you put a light behind them. They really do just brighten up right when they're at the perfect spot. I'm not sure why that is, but that is what it is, and it works in our favor. So another thing I wanted to mention is that, as you can see, most of these ones that I've done so far are not very big in comparison to a 4-meter wall piece or floor piece. Most of them fit within a 4-meter piece. Other ones are, a little bit larger, like this one and the elephant. That being said, depending on the size of the artwork that you're looking for in your zoo, if you have a specific spot you like to put something and it's a very large area, you can basically use any square colorable piece in the game. So this is the very smallest one that I could find because I wanted to be able to make things that were detailed and not very big. However, if you are looking to make something bigger, you could use art shapes. The square art shapes work great. I say the square shapes. You can also use round. You can basically use anything as long as it's the same shape over and over again. I just like the square because then you get that filled in effect where there's no gaps or spacing. That being said, for anybody who does remember perler beads, there was different shaped pegboards. And there was a round one, and the round one had a different pattern of pegs on it. So instead of being square and all lined up like the way you would do a square one, there was one in the center, and then there were small circles slowly getting larger until it filled out the circle. I am planning on creating one of those so that if you wanted to make snowflakes or circular mosaics, you would get a nicer, rounder look. The only thing is that you're going to have spacing in between them. So I'm going to play around with a few different shapes to see what works best. And then I'll be coming back with basically an update video on pixel art once I can get that created. It's going to be a little bit more work and a lot of use of the advanced move tool so that I can get circles. But basically that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy pixel art.